Late-night drives always provided Melanie with clarity. The hum of the engine, the vast stretches of road, and the solitude always helped her think. It was her way of dealing with stress, and after a particularly grueling day at work, she took to the streets to clear her head. The city was changing, with new overpasses and under-construction zones popping up everywhere. This night, she decided to explore one of the newer roads that was rumored to be a shortcut home. It weaved through an old industrial part of the town that was mostly abandoned now. As the city lights receded behind her, Melanie noticed her radio losing its connection, slowly taken over by static. She tried scanning for other stations, but each channel only grew louder with the white noise until she turned it off. The road was poorly lit, with only sporadic streetlights punctuating the darkness. But the unease started when she spotted a lone car trailing her. Every time Melanie took a turn, the car did too, its headlights piercing through her rearview mirror. She tried convincing herself it was just someone else trying the new route. But then, she remembered the urban legends, stories she'd brushed off as kids trying to spook each other. Legends about a car with no driver, known as the static shadow, that would appear on this very road, chasing lone drivers before mysteriously disappearing. As the fear grew, Melanie decided to test her suspicion. She took a series of complicated turns, even turning into a derelict factory compound. But the car still followed, always a constant distance away. Panic surged as she dialed 911, but her phone displayed no signal. Heart pounding, she remembered an old trick her brother taught her: slam the brakes and turn off the headlights. Hoping the pursuer would drive past, she executed the maneuver in an alley between two old warehouses. Holding her breath, she saw the car slow down, its headlights scanning the alleyways, like predatory eyes searching for prey. For what felt like an eternity, the car idled, the static from its radio filling the night air. Then, as suddenly as it appeared, it sped off. Melanie waited a few minutes to ensure it was gone. Shaking, she turned her car around and sped back toward the main road, the city lights now a beacon of safety. As she approached her familiar neighborhood, the weight on her chest lifted. She parked in her driveway, relief flooding her. But as she entered her home, the unmistakable sound of static greeted her. Her own car radio had switched on by itself. Terrified, she ran back out to see her headlights blink thrice and then fade. She never drove that route again and soon moved to a different city. But the fear lingered, especially during late-night drives. Every time she'd hear static on the radio, her heart would skip a beat, fearing the appearance of the static shadow. The urban legend had become her haunting reality.
Jason had been driving for hours. It was one of those cross-country drives that seemed endless, a never-ending stretch of asphalt, cutting through dark forests and empty fields. The radio played softly in the background, an old country tune, while the dashboard clock blinked 2:23 a.m. It had been a long time since he passed another car. He cherished the solitude, the sound of the engine humming, the gentle roar of tires against the road. But as the night deepened, the isolation began to feel eerie. A thin layer of fog started to creep over the highway. The beams from the headlights seemed to get swallowed whole, making the road ahead appear to vanish. He glanced at the fuel gouge and cursed under his breath. Almost empty. He remembered seeing a sign for a gas station a while back, but how long ago was that? He'd lost track of time. Suddenly his phone beeped, a low battery warning. Great, he thought. Not now. He'd intended to charge it at the last rest stop, but had forgotten. Trying to shake off a rising sense of unease, he squinted into the fog, hoping to see the outline of a gas station. A few miles later, a dim light appeared through the mist. Relieved, Jason pulled off the highway into a desolate-looking gas station. The sign overhead was rusted and barely legible, reading, "Hillside Fuel." The whole place seemed to be stuck in a different decade. As he began to fill up, he noticed there wasn't another soul in sight. The small convenience store adjacent to the pumps was dark, save for a single flickering fluorescent light inside. He could make out rows of old candy and outdated magazines through the dirty windows. Finishing up, he went to pay at the window slot beside the entrance. As he slipped his cash in, a wrinkled hand reached out and took it without a word. The hand hesitated for a moment before passing back his change. Something about that hand seemed off, but Jason couldn't quite place it. He got back into his car, eager to get back on the road. As he started the engine, his headlights illuminated the face of a man standing by the convenience store. The man had a gaunt face, with sunken eyes and a vacant expression, staring right at Jason. A cold shiver ran down his spine. He quickly drove out of the station, checking his rearview mirror to see the man still standing there, motionless, watching him. Back on the highway, he tried to shake off the unease. He chalked up his anxiety to fatigue and the creepy ambiance of the foggy night, but the feeling didn't subside. If anything, it intensified. He felt as if he was being followed. Every so often, he would glance in his mirror, half expecting to see the face of that gaunt man, but there was nothing. An hour passed, and he thought he saw a silhouette in his rearview mirror. A car? He couldn't be sure. The fog had thickened to the point where visibility was nearly zero. Jason sped up, trying to put distance between himself and any potential pursuer. Suddenly, the radio, which had been his only source of comfort, started to glitch, transitioning between stations. Static filled the car, making him grip the wheel tighter. Then, as abruptly as it started, the radio fell silent. That's when he heard it. A faint tapping. It was coming from the back of his car. Jason's heart raced as he realized it wasn't something external. The sound was coming from inside the trunk. He remembered stories of hitchhikers or escapees hiding in unsuspecting drivers' cars, but he hadn't stopped anywhere for hours, except the gas station. Panic took over. His mind raced, thinking of what he could possibly do. Up ahead, he spotted an illuminated sign, a motel. Without hesitation, he swerved off the highway, tires screeching as he pulled into the motel parking lot. He jumped out of the car, phone in hand, and sprinted to the reception. A concerned night clerk called the police after seeing the state Jason was in. Within minutes, sirens wailed in the distance. The police approached Jason's car cautiously, weapons drawn. The trunk was popped open, revealing nothing, just his luggage. Jason, confused and embarrassed, tried to explain the tapping he'd heard. The officers exchanged glances, and then one of them spoke up. "Son, you've been driving for hours late at night. Sometimes the mind plays tricks, but better safe than sorry." The officers left, and Jason tried to laugh off the incident with the clerk. But as he walked to his assigned room, he felt a breeze on his neck, and a small piece of paper fell to the ground. Picking it up, he read, "I like the game, but I prefer a challenge. Next time." Heart-pounding, Jason looked around, but there was no one in sight. The night was still, the fog heavier than ever, and he realized that sometimes it wasn't what was seen that was terrifying, but what remained unseen.